going on, everybody? It's Frito here for your Overwatch. Happy launch day. Today we're going to be doing a tier list, having played for multiple days pre-release against some top level creators. I feel like I have a pretty good bead on the power level of all the characters in the game. We're going to think about this for the average level of solo queue play on both PC and console. Kicking it off, let's look at the supports. Kiriko, I'm going to slap right into A tier. The reason is, in solo queue, you're going to find that she has a lot of flexibility to play around your teammates in the way that they want to play. Similar to playing a character like Zarya, who's very flexible. If your teammate is feeding or playing defensive, you can kind of choose your playstyle. Kiriko is that way, where if they're on a flank, maybe you join them. If they're playing defensive, you can interrupt the enemy's big plays with Suzu and lots of healing. Kiriko is most definitely capable of main healing at least one target. She's not going to be able to area of effect heal so well, but you often won't need that in a very flanky style metagame. Kiriko's teleport cooldown is so low, you kind of can just be wherever you need to be, and as long as you are good with the timing of her abilities and can aim a little bit for the head when you need to, Kiriko is going to feel very flexible. Now, her peak power might not be the best. As the meta starts to get figured out a little bit and stabilizes later in the season, you might find that she's not so necessary. Next up, into the S tier for solo queue, we're gonna say Lucio. In a game where there's a lot of speed boosts moving around, speed is a big currency. Getting in and out, or simply just dodging an engagement or an ultimate like Kitsune Rush, has a ton of value. Especially when we look at the top characters in the other categories, you have to think to yourself, can you survive a fight against the Genji? I don't find poke to be too strong, and with so many flankers, Lucio either can defend against them or go in aggressive with them. We'll populate the rest of the A tier really quick, and just note that Zenyatta's Discord Orb, I think, still is like the single most powerful ability in Overwatch for the support category. You're going to find that Discord Orb is really good at covering Kiriko's weaknesses, because her damage overall isn't that great. Her dueling is good, but you're going to notice that you can't really wear down tanks very easily with Kiriko that have shields that block her damage and makes her poke look meaningless. Zenyatta's Discord Orb gives you a target to go flank and then decimate with the orb on them. Kiriko and Zen is a very insane pairing, I find, considering as well she can Suzu to protect him if he gets aggressed upon. But on the same token, it depends on your team's ability to peel for you. So if you feel like you can't be kept alive and have teamwork to survive, you'll probably have to pick another one of these other two picks, or one of the ones above him, with Baptiste or Brigitte. I think a lot of players seem to be a bit low on Baptiste right now because it's so flanky, but I think you'll find, especially on the new push map, Esperança, there's enough high ground to stabilize and really get some good angles to heal your team. And his offensive potential after the recent buff on his range and damage, I think he's kind of nasty. While he doesn't flank, he holds his position well and can output a ton of value from that turret position. Brigitte as well is another defensive option for holding position. She has mobility to get away and the crowd control a little bit to help against things like Genji, where a simple boop might knock him far enough away to not wipe your whole team. And remember, these two picks are the big area of effect healers. And this is where the tension in the metagame is going to be felt, because whereas there is characters like Zen and Kiriko that are really nuts at targeting a single thing, dealing high bursts of damage, they're not great at healing the whole team. So what happens is characters like Brigitte and Baptiste, who are insane with area of effect healing, if the enemy fails to burst down that single target and you heal them up, you're going to get a ton of support ult, a ton of healing done, and it can feel like the whole team's unkillable. And it sort of depends on the execution of those two playstyles, which one wins out. I think some people are sleeping on the potential stats still of Baptiste and Brigitte in that regard. And if you have a bit of teamwork, you can definitely fortify a position. And there's so much value to be had in Overwatch in being able to play the objective and hold your ground. It can be expensive and difficult to do so, but don't get fooled into thinking you have to always flank and deathmatch. Oftentimes, there's power positions on maps that you can put these two characters on specifically, and they're going to really boost your ability to hold it and drain the clock, even if they aren't as offensive as some of the other options. Ana, I'm a little bit worried for. I was surprised to see Overwatch League playing Ana and Zen and not Kiriko, but again, that's like the team environment, different meta altogether. So I think what you should consider is, are you able to get your ideal power position on the map, Or do you feel so skilled that you can just dual squishies? Because up against tanks, if you're expecting to get loads of value just hitting your sleep and nade on a tank, well, Kiriko is probably going to cleanse it. So it's more tricky to get Ana value on this patch. Keep in mind, characters like DPS are moving faster. There's lots of move speeds, lots of flanks. I think Ana's a bit tough to play and doesn't have the AoE sustain of some of the other supports above her. The rest of the support category we're going to populate thusly. Mercy and Moira kind of feel like budget versions of Kiriko to me, or let's say like entry-level characters in comparison. Why go DPS Moira if you can use Kiriko headshot and have more of a skill ceiling? And Mercy feels kind of the same, though being able to res and damage amp is a really big deal. Mercy and Moira just feel a bit outpaced for me. I think they're only going to get more value for you if you can't play some of the ones above them on the tier list. There's better death ball healers than Moira. There's better DPS style supports than Moira. Mercy's pocket ability is really strong, so if you have a specific hero matchup and player you're trying to sync with, either Pharah, Echo, Ashe maybe, but Kiriko's healing is so strong at 70 heals per second, even though you're going to lose that damage amp in the poke phase, you're still going to have a lot of pocket single target healing. So that's how the support category is panning out for me. Now let's move on to the tanks in the game. We're going to keep knocking out the S tier right away. We have Winston and Sigma up here at the top. Winston is nutty on this patch for a combination of reasons. I'd say having a barrier is something that you can engage around. And when you have a very all-in mobility style of play where you either need to go attack or defend quickly, Winston has a lot of options to mold the engagement in his favor, whether responding to a dive or deciding to go in aggressively. Because Winston can dive in, put a bubble down, and the flankers come with, Kiriko comes with, the whole gang comes along. It's pretty tough to beat. Not to mention, I'm going to spoil the upcoming video on how to counter Kiriko a little bit. One of her best counters to me is the defensive tanks, the ones that have barriers or anti-damage mitigation abilities that are able to stop that Kitsune rush from just rolling over your whole team. Being able to put a barrier down might slow down the advancement of some of that offense, whereas otherwise, if you have a tank that doesn't have any defense, well, it's just so easy to roll you over because there's nothing to stop it. Sigma, I got an S mainly because there's a few maps where he's going to be the default pick. If it's a sniper style map and you don't have to dive up and down on high ground too much, or if your comp is playing around that, he's kind of the best for that. He's got an insane damage output, some defenses, and a lot of flexibility in order to interact with some of the best stuff in the game. But I think he's by no means easy to play. He just has that potential. So keep in mind, don't outstretch and expect to be able to get pocketed. That's not what Sigma does. He kind of like holds a position, turrets up, sort of like Baptiste might want to. Hit your shots and don't expect to W or get W'd on or you'll fall over. Last for the S tier, we're going to put Zarya, who's going to interact with the rest of the game. I'm actually going to put her above Sigma at the last moment here because especially when you see a DPS character all in on your backline and you can use the bubble to counter it, well, that's going to slow down their advance, make it not able to hit the DPS passive. One of the better answers against Dragon Blade. Now, I will note the Kitsune Rush ult is so insane. Don't expect bubbles to like save you from that. In a similar way, Zarya is just a very flexible character right now. And like I said in my Kiriko video, being able to cleanse Zarya to give her an extra bubble almost, like another get out of jail free card, means that she can pocket Zarya and keep her alive through thick and thin and stay alive to keep that high charge up. So this is kind of the tank metagame for me and the different playstyles you might want to consider. Next, we'll populate the rest of the A tier for tanks. Hog is a character a lot of players are sleeping on, I feel. Kiriko can cleanse, the biggest counter to Hog. So if you've got a sick Hog, it might be the time to bring him out. While some of his matchups against some of the armor tanks make him look a little weak because his damage doesn't really roll them over like he might want to, there still feels like there's a lot of squishies roaming around that are easily hookable, and his ult is nasty, especially when you can Suzu to cleanse him from any debuff. I wouldn't sleep on Roadhog on this patch. On the other sides are the other dive tanks, D.Va and Wrecking Ball. I find that Wrecking Ball is pretty underrated, has some nuts offense and playmaking, but just a little bit harder to get the same value out of as the other tanks. It's going to be sort of based on your skill. I don't think you're going to be upset playing with a Wrecking Ball if they're good at him, but it's a little easier to have some defense on your tank, and it might not feel so necessary to be all in on the offense of Wrecking Ball, especially since there's not a lot of static targets anyway. Ball's strength of like rolling in and displacing isn't really there so much. There's going to be flanking you anyway, so why not respond with your own diva or Winston, who more easily defends and stands and fights, whereas Ball kind of wants to disrupt, and well, they're already disrupting you, so just take the fight that's coming to you. But if you do find yourself up against some of the more static playstyles, then Ball's gonna be fine. Diva recently got a buff. Her armor feels quite tanky. Being able to go up and down high ground as well as peel back for some all-in dives against a character like Winston and Kiriko, you can save your Zenyatta from the brink of death with defense matrix. But I just think overall Winston has the stronger peak playstyle because he has ranged poke. Everybody sleeps on Winston's Tesla cannon. I got some gameplay to show you in upcoming videos, but being able to poke down squishy targets as they're advancing in order to set up and stage a dive means that Winston can either put the bubble down defensively or have the option to go aggressively, whereas Diva is kind of just stuck reacting and isn't as potent going deep in, because once you do so, if the enemy responds, well, now they know you don't have any defenses in the back, whereas Winston's just a little bit more flexible, I find. But I think if you're defending up against the dive, Diva is absolutely insane and will help you survive. Reinhardt remains in the A tier. You might think with so many flanking playstyles being so good, how can Reinhardt have a place? Well, it turns out there's a lot of maps where he just holds his ground. And a quick early tip for you in Overwatch 2, playing the objective is a lot better in Overwatch 2 than 1. And that might sound insane to say, but the truth was, in Overwatch 1, team comps were so powerful that you had to interact with the way the team comps were built. And if they were too strong, going to the objective probably was just a death sentence. But in Overwatch 2, you can force your own playstyle a little bit more on these maps and get value where your character is good, as opposed to always needing to engage with the entire enemy team's comp. Team comps aren't as strong now, so there just isn't a lot of characters that can go toe-to-toe with Reinhardt on the objective, and if he bullies his way on that fight, well, you gotta get out of the way and concede some ground. So I think Ryan's quite underrated. He can really slow the game down and force you to play on his terms, and I think he's pretty good against Kiriko, to be honest. You might think the flanking playstyle is a big problem for him. I'd say only if they have Discord Orb. If they don't, Kiriko's damage is so low, she's never gonna help get rid of the shield or even headshot him. He's got the little tiny head hitbox, got all that armor. He's really gonna roll over the front line a bit up against the Kiriko comp, unless she really makes some playmaking Suzus. But for the most part, with how natural Reinhardt is to play around, I still think you're safe playing him. Orisa got a buff, but I'm still not convinced that this character is necessary in the metagame at any point. Like, I think it's matchup specific. The skill floor in Orisa is actually a lot higher than some of the other tanks. And I just think the Overwatch community maybe hasn't got enough time on the character to have lots of us be masters at her. I just think that she's so farmable by a lot of characters and usually not that much of a threat. She's kind of a gimmicky hero that when she lands her abilities, she looks really good, but a lot of the other times she just doesn't seem to contribute much. After talking her down this much, I almost feel like I should drop her lower, but she did get some playtime in Owl, so maybe there's something I'm missing. They've tried to tweak her up and down, and I just don't know what she's supposed to interact with in the game, to be honest. And that's kind of how I feel now about Junker Queen, who both her and Doomfist, you're going to need to be a specialist at all three of these heroes down here at the bottom that don't really have any direct teamwork impact. The thick DPS tank playstyle isn't actually that strong, I feel, unless you're nuts on that pick. I also feel like these are the tanks that are the easiest to counter. I say there's not really hard counters in Overwatch 2. These three with the minimal tanking defenses sort of feel like the easiest tanks to counter, or characters in general in the whole game, when you put a Discord Orb on them and have a few decent hero picks on your side. Remember, Junker Queen's bleed ability can be cleansed. Same with her anti from her ultimate. Doomfist was sort of nerfed into the ground and never buffed back. And I think Orisa just requires the enemy not knowing what to do against her. But we've got videos on the channel on how to counter her if you're struggling, so check that out. I think that still holds up on launch day patch. Onto the DPS picks now. Genji all the way into S tier. DPS passive helps him the most, and if you look at the type of characters that are good right now, Genji syncs up with their playstyle quite well. I made a whole video dedicated to Genji, of course. I just think he's really flexible, doesn't have too many bad matchups, without a lot of stuns or easy abilities in the game. Having the mobility to navigate the fight, set up pincers, and respond to the enemy in a very natural way, as well as a very underrated reflect, which is a sick defense ability ability in Overwatch 2. In Overwatch 1, it was kind of a joke, but now that's legit going to get you a lot of value, especially with the big bursts of damage that come through, whether it's a Kitsune Rush or some target focus fire. Genji's Reflect is a huge tool in order to interact with the game. We're going to populate the rest of the A tier here with a bunch of picks that are very flexible in their positioning, make good use of the DPS passive. That's going to be Reaper, Soldier, Sojourn, and Sombra especially. Those picks really enjoy being able to speed up, to chase down targets, or even to get a kill using their resources and getting away. That's pretty big. Don't underrate that. Like, people always think about the snowball mechanic, but the anti-feed mechanic of retreating with the speed boost is a huge deal. The reload boost is kind of neither here nor there, but they play well with the Kiriko and against one. Don't underestimate the ability of a character like Reaper to Wraith form to dodge a Dragon Blade, which is incredibly powerful right now, or Sombra to hack him and get away. Those mobility options to navigate the fight, be a bit defensive, and target focus fire is really big. So those picks are strong. I've got Ashe a little bit higher on the list than I'm comfortable with. I'm taking the advice from some friends that she's pretty good right now. I think because you're not going to see too much Ana, Bob is just going to go uncontested, and that's a huge ultimate, again, for playing the objective and just being a complete annoyance. Really hard to get flanked when you got Bob by your side. Ashe as well can kind of dynamically play and position on the map with her mobility, but I'll warn, if the game feels a bit too flanky and you don't have the protection or teamwork or team comp to keep Ashe alive, she might be an easy dive target, so look out for that. Echo is kind of similar to Genji, where she just plays Overwatch 2 quite well. On paper, it should feel like she's not very good because of all the other things that you would think could counter her, but her abilities are just so strong, even though she can get shot out of the air. She'd be even stronger if, like, Mercy was a better option, for example, but as it stands, she's sort of like a budget Genji. But she does have better range than him, and if you're defending, you might prefer Duplicate to add more sustain to the team fight. Keep in mind, if they have a Kiriko, it's pretty tough for her to shoot an Echo. Whereas Zen, Bap, Mercy, these picks enable the ranged battle a lot better. Kiriko's kind of on the ground flanking. The more low ground the enemy team comp is focused on, then Echo has plays to make from the sky. Focusing beam is nuts still. There's little things that stop it, so get something half and kill it for free. That's pretty strong in my opinion. For whatever reason, I forgot to put Tracer in this list. We're going to put her somewhere around here. I think Reaper is a much easier option. Remember, Tracer's damage is lower in Overwatch 2, but of course in the flanking metagame, she has to be considered a top pick if you have the skills to play her. I just think Soldier, Reaper, Genji are a bit easier, but if you got the skills, she can go in with a Winston dive too. Now looking at the B tier, these are picks that I don't find so threatening, but not terrible. You can consider them as options if you favor your own skill in a matchup against something the enemy's playing, but I don't know if you ever need to play any of these picks. Even on a sniper dominant map, I don't know if you even need to snipe with how strong running at the enemy has been on the current build. Bastion, Mei, Junk, Cassidy are really good tank busters, but I don't know if you feel that's too necessary. And the more that the enemy is playing like a dive style, well, they're going to dodge your tank busting anyway. It sort of depends. We'll give the B tier here all of this sort of map, matchup, and skill depending. I can see these picks be fine, but I don't think they're necessary at any point. And the last character that we have for the list is Symmetra. Is she C or D? I don't know. I think you can pick her on Li Jiang, and good luck anywhere else. That's how I feel about Symmetra. Everything I said about these tank busty kind of space control type DPS goes for Symmetra as well, and I think she's just less flexible, and because so much of her power is in her teleporter, you're going to need to be in a pre-made team, I think, to communicate and coordinate around it as effectively as a top tier owl team might be able to. Guys, that's everything for our launch day tier list. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. Love to know if you're enjoying playing Overwatch, if you can eventually get onto the servers, I hope. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to leave it with a like, and don't forget to subscribe and click the bell icon to actually get notified when our videos go live. That's been it for me. I've been Frito for your Overwatch. We'll see you guys next time.